I think a lot of this year, end of last year, has been how do we make Realms SPL governance as valuable and as useful as we can for these sort of large DAOs who are leveraging it. And we probably have maybe, let's call it, 30 really huge DAOs that are using SPL governance, that are using it for treasury management, that are using it for decentralization and voting associated with that. And in the process of sort of onboarding these mega DAOs, we've become one of, if not, I'm pretty sure the biggest contract on Solana from the standpoint of treasury value. And that is it's a great thing to have happen, but it's also something that carries with it a large responsibility to ensure that there aren't bugs, there aren't vulnerabilities, to ensure that people know what they're voting on when a proposal happens. And so I think for us, a lot of this year has been, how do we really shore up the problems that these large DAOs are facing and ensure that we're providing them with a secure, a scalable experience to these large audiences.
Good to have you, Emon. Good to have you, Emon. Let's dive into it. Let's talk a little bit about everything that has governance layer, but also that has you involved in building this. And before we start, could you give a very brief introduction on what you're doing, and we have some follow-up questions.
Yeah, of course. So very brief introduction. I'm Emon Motamendi. I sit within Solana Labs on the product side. I help run our DAO vertical, our DeFi vertical, as well as a number of different initiatives across labs.
Awesome. That's you have such great responsibility. But you've also come with some great experience with you, and you were previously on Reddit, if I'm not wrong, which was another major social platform that involved some kind of communities, maybe the grassroots communities of the internet. What major things did you bring? What lessons did you bring from Reddit to Solana into designing the governance layer and also being responsible to DeFi? I'm more interested in the governance side of things and on the community side of things.
Yeah, it's a great question. In a lot of ways, subreddits maybe are the OG DAOs with no tooling involved, just yelling at each other across the internet to figure things out. So at Reddit, I was lucky enough. One of the projects that I helped lead was spinning up our own sort of internal digital currency within Reddit, leveraging sort of the award system like Reddit Gold, Reddit Silver, and creating a token, a Reddit coin that people could use to spend on different experiences within Reddit. And one of the things that we looked at as part of that experience was, what would actual governance look like at the subreddit level, at the community level? Because you see, to your point, you see a lot of the same parallels within a subreddit and within those communities as you do within a DAO. So just taking that apart to some degree, within a subreddit, you have the moderators. These are the folks who are running the community. They're responsible for the day-to-day. They're defining the rules of how people might behave on this subreddit. In a lot of ways, it's kind of similar to the council concept we have within SPL governance. And then you have all of the members of the subreddit, either the sort of lurkers who are just coming to view the content, or the actual people who are posting, who are engaged, who are involved. Maybe we call those like the contributors to the DAO. And there's so much interplay between those two groups. The motivations are different depending on where you sit. The types of work you want to do are different depending on where you sit. The way you organize your community is different. And it's not just across the vector of the role that you play. It's across the vector of, what is this community supposed to do, right? In a subreddit, maybe you're trying to be this, 20 million r/videos or r/data is beautiful type huge community, or actually maybe you want something that's a lot more intimate, that's a lot more refined to a certain group of people, where you don't want all of these outsiders coming in. And obviously you see the same thing in a DAO context. Not every DAO sets out to be this huge thing. And so, yeah, I think there are so many parallels between the two groups. And to be honest, that's a lot of what had me excited to come to the Solana ecosystem and to work on DAO specifically was, seeing the need for this type of tooling in the subreddit context, seeing the power that can come from, working across the internet with people that you don't know or that you don't necessarily trust. And what is, the minimum viable tool set necessary to sort of expand the horizons of those types of experiences and bring more utility to folks operating in those contexts.
I can also spot the overlaps, but I'm also spotting a very important component that we are missing on the on-chain governance layer, which is the karma side of things, the reputation, which for sure plays a huge role, together with the moderation of each subreddit. So I see that we still have work to do in this decentralized world.
And actually, on that point, I haven't really thought that hard about this previously, but one of the things that Reddit, I think, did very well is when you look at the karma system on Reddit, it wasn't this extremely calculated, thought out, mathematical thing. It was kind of like, hey, here's the different weights we're going to give to different things. We're not going to be too prescriptive on when someone should upvote or not upvote, or when someone should give an award or not give an award. But we're going to kind of take it very bottoms up and let the community decide what they want to value and how they want to consider those different elements. And maybe that's actually could be something that we draw upon as we think about, the reputation system in a DAO. I think so much of it is like, maybe the project leader sitting down and defining, hey, here are the behaviors we care about. Here are the metrics we want to use. Whereas I wonder if a very bottoms up, something as simple as an upvote or something as like a like button when someone does something good, and just using that to be a very, very bare bones karma system and seeing where it goes from there, maybe gets you to something more lightweight, less prescriptive, but potentially something that's easier to manage in the long run.
Yeah, by just starting and setting that foundation and allow people to build and experiment, it's halfway there. So yeah, totally up for it. Totally up for it.
I think that's a great segue to one of the questions that we want to discuss here today. We've come a long way, SPL governance and the whole Solana DAO tooling space. Magnificent work, magnificent projects and tools for every DAO friend to use. Can you give us a TLDR for the audience of what happened in SPL governance this year and where we're going to for the next year? What we're looking at as a sort of, I don't want to say the word roadmap because that's so 2022 to 2020, but what are we looking for and what have we achieved so that people know the awesomeness of Realms?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think a lot of this year, end of last year, has been how do we make Realms SPL governance as valuable and as useful as we can for these sort of large DAOs who are leveraging it. And we probably have, maybe let's call it 30 really, really huge DAOs that are using SPL governance, that are using it for treasury management, that are using it for decentralization and voting associated with that. And in the process of sort of onboarding these mega DAOs, we've become one of, if not, I'm pretty sure the biggest contract on Solana from the standpoint of treasury value. And that is it's a great thing to have happen, but it's also something that carries with it a large responsibility to ensure that there aren't bugs, there aren't vulnerabilities, to ensure that people know what they're voting on when a proposal happens. And so I think for us, a lot of this year has been, how do we really shore up the problems that these large DAOs are facing and ensure that we're providing them with a secure, a scalable experience to these large audiences. And I think, by necessity in a lot of ways, like when when you do have that level of usage and you have so many folks from the ecosystem coming to your platform, you are going to be reactive to their needs. But I think what I'm excited about going into next year is, what does it mean to really take the utility of DAO infrastructure, of DAO tooling, and expand it to new audiences? And the new audience question, I think, is has historically been an interesting one, where when a lot of people talk about, hey, let's make DAOs bigger, we're excited about DAOs. They're excited about things like, Constitution DAO. They're excited about some of these like very flash in the pan type, let's get a group together, raise funds, do something interesting quickly piece. But I think as we think about, the types of folks we want to go after, it's important to go back to what are the actual problems that a DAO is solving at the end of the day. And, for me, the problems that I've always seen as a DAO being very useful for are, one, shared ownership of some underlying asset, and then two, actually making changes based upon a vote to some asset. So the obvious answer to what that some asset is like a smart contract, where a DAO can go and vote on a smart contract, vote on a change to a smart contract, and obviously have that change be enacted into code. But there's a lot of other things that you can see that would apply there as well. So for instance, one of the ideas we've tossed back and forth for a while is, what would it look like if a DAO actually managed Web2 logins? Like, let's say, your company has a Twitter account. Today you all probably use the same, username and password. You have it shared among all of you. But what would it look like if you actually had like permissions associated with that, and you could vote on who has certain permissions, who can make certain tweets? Maybe a tweet has to, get approved by the multi-sig or the DAO before the tweet actually goes through. I think there's a lot of areas where expanding the realm of decentralization and of that trustlessness can be beneficial. I think the other piece that has been sort of been on the outskirts of the DAO narrative to date, and I would love to see it be a much bigger part of 2024, is the actual regulatory framework and policy framework for a lot of these entities, because there's obviously a perspective in the Web 2 world that, oh, people are drawn to Web 3 because of the lawlessness, because of the lack of regulation, when in fact, like, the majority of the DAOs we chat with are like, no, we're praying that there's some sort of regulatory clarity that we can leverage for our DAO. Like, we actually actively want that. We don't want to be operating in this gray space of having this be undefined. And I know that there's a lot of bodies out there, whether it's a governmental body or something else, who are kind of raising their hand and saying, hey, we want to be the place for DAOs. We're willing to provide that regulatory framework. And I think it's a huge opportunity right now for someone to take advantage and to really be the pioneer in the Web3 space. Obviously, I'm based in the US. I would love to see the US be doing more of that. But I think a lot of that legislation and regulation we're going to see coming from abroad. And I think that's exciting as well. And so seeing more innovation on the policy side of things, because once you have that innovation in place, you basically are able to spin up these entities very quickly, leverage them for decentralized purposes, and do so in a legal fashion. And I think by enabling that, you'll start to see more of the like Delaware for DAOs, where anyone thinks by default, let me create a LLC. Well, maybe that default will switch to, hey, let me create a DAO and move more quickly in a more digitally native way.
But do you think there's going to be new legislation that is going to be built for DAOs and is going to be voted in for DAOs, or we're going to get something existing which they're going to appropriate, change it a little bit, add a couple of bullet points, and then it will apply to DAOs? So you're going to kind of turn DAOs into a KYC'd entity where everything is kind of resembles an LLC, needs a lawyer and an accountant, and is checked by the IRS.
Yeah, in terms of the different geographies that we've chatted with, I think different folks are approaching it different ways. Certain folks are approaching it from the standpoint of, what do those few bullet points look like that we can just add on? Whereas others are saying, hey, what would it look like if we were much more forward thinking in this space and actually treated a DAO as a net new entity? So I would love to know the crystal ball of where things shake out, but we're doing what we can in terms of having those conversations, educating regulators, and seeing where they can take it.
How can Solana and the general ecosystem help a DAO that wants to incorporate, that wants to be taxed, that wants transparency, and wants to tap into banking services, Web 2 services, and generally get connected with the real world?
Yeah, so I think there's a few folks in our ecosystem who are trying to push this forward. So I think you guys know Jose at BCB Group. He's really focused on yeah, I know. Pray to Jose. He's really focused on legal frameworks for DAOs, how a DAO can spin up in a regulatory compliant way. He has friends and family DAO in the UK, and he set up sort of what those frameworks look like. And so Jose, for folks who are interested in this, Jose is often the first connection I make for them because he's really dug into it. Obviously, there's also slow ventures in the U.S. with Montana Land SDAO, basically saying, hey, how can you spin up a DAO that can legally own art or IP or real estate, or other types of sort of real world assets, and they've spun up legal frameworks that others can use in order to do that. Um, and those are the examples that I really love, which is that rather than someone saying, hey, I've dug into the legal frameworks, here's all of this legislation that you can dig into. It's actually folks dog fooding this with their own DAOs, where you can see how these DAOs work, you can see the steps they went through, and it kind of provides you a playbook that you can push forward into the future.
That's pretty awesome. Since they are around, it means they've survived the regulatory race, and yeah, we have a lot to learn from them.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's an interesting look at the future. I love how we kind of, I don't know, we worked very hard in Realms. I can see the all the extensions, all the players building on Realms. So the interconnected, let's say, the ecosystem within the Solana space is fully functional. Like as a Realms power user, I can, like, everything has been added to Realms, from NFTs to VSRs to multisigs. Like, everything is now under one roof, and it's extremely usable. And I really applaud the move to onboard Web 2 to the Solana governance layer. I really look forward to it, because these are the problems that we are facing, because we are operating a DAO which is profitable, and we are having hard time tapping into services like to deploy our assets and reward our workers. So this is going to be the most interesting year.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious from your guys' perspectives. As we think about onboarding Web 2 users into Web 3 into Solana, and also as we think about increasing the amount of DAO activity on Solana, whether you guys feel like DAOs are a byproduct of increased users within Web 3, or if they're actually the thing that can draw people into Web 3. And what I mean by that is, I think there's a perspective that DAOs are kind of fundamental infrastructure for any blockchain ecosystem, and therefore, maybe they're not the thing that attracts a net new user into Web 3. But as you have more entities and companies and organizations being built into Web 3, as they think about effectively decentralizing their user base, their operations, then by extension you'll see a rise in DAOs, and DAOs kind of play this core infrastructural layer within Web 3. Or there's this alternate perspective where DAOs can actually be the hook to draw net new users into Web 3. And so I think there's kind of two good arguments for that world as well. One is from the perspective of actually joining a DAO around some specific interest area that catches your eye. So Constitution DAO maybe is an example of that. Maybe Links DAO is a better example of that, where there's some potential utility in the real world for joining the DAO. And those are some of the more sort of like flash in the pan ones that I was describing earlier. But I think the other really compelling use case there for bringing people into Web3 via DAO is actually from an employment perspective. Like this is one of the way I've been sort of in and out of Web3 since like 2013, 2014. But the time in which I actually really started working hands-on within the ecosystem was when I had the opportunity to join a DAO as a part-time contributor. And that's really what allowed me to get my feet wet. That's, I started getting tokens from the DAO, and therefore I had to figure out what the right rails and products were used to manage those tokens. And I essentially became a Web3 user as a result of my contributor status in this DAO, and that was kind of what onboarded me into the ecosystem. And so I'm excited. I think a lot of people sort of think about it as the first bucket of this infrastructural layer, but I'm actually excited about the potential of it as like a hook to draw people into the ecosystem as well. And I'm curious how you guys think about it.
I think the truth, at least my truth, is somewhere in the middle. I really believe that DAOs are the inevitable destination, since on-chain verification and transparency and owning your data and being able to verify everything is going to be cheap and easy and available to everyone. I think this is the definition of DAO, the public ledger and the transparency, and so this is the one part of the argument. I think the other part of the argument is this flat structure where everybody can maybe feel closer at ownership, where this kind of direct democracy, quote unquote, is appealing. Maybe it's the most simplistic idea of a DAO, but it's a very valuable one. Maybe it's not a functional idea. Maybe throughout our experiments, we've kind of found out that an absolutely flat structure kind of loses focus. But despite that, I think it's a very powerful experiment, and I think it draws people. And yes, being able to own, it's partly ownership to a project. If your vote moves the treasury, if you're a voting shareholder, translated into real world language, then I think it's powerful. I don't think it's functional, but I think it's extremely powerful. And here we are to experiment in order to find what is functional. Somewhere in the middle, I think the intellectual and kind of philosophical structure of a DAO and the idea of a DAO is extremely appealing. It's a technological open democracy. It's a very beautiful idea. What about you, Taki? What do you think?
I think one of the most powerful components when it comes to DAOs is indeed ownership, that you can have a say into where this ship goes and how you can propose and do things according to the vision of the greater community that you're under. But we also need to pay attention to not to overdo it by spinning DAOs for whatever reason. So a DAO is a mean to an end. So we need to, we always need to consider, do we really need a DAO in this? And in most cases we need, but we haven't figured out, no one has figured out yet how these things work most optimally. That's why we keep experimenting with structures that are, either very flat or, with hierarchies and roles and who is above who and the councils and elected officials and whatnot. But I really think that the powerful thing there is about ownership, that you can affect anywhere your community goes. And you need to have a clear path for everybody that joins from either from day one or in day 100. There needs to be a clear path from the bottom to the top, so that that you can acquire some power or some influence or whatever you want to call it, some governance power. And also the way that we can collaborate and shape entities and companies, so to speak, that we can work together, earn together, and keep growing together as communities. And I think that's going to play a very, very important role in the future. We keep seeing that, people coming more and more online. And what's going to inevitably happen, in my opinion, is that we're going to see small communities scattered around, the blockchain or the internet, and how we find the best way to collaborate and have them work in the most efficient fashion. I think that's going to be the key to the future, in my opinion.
100%. Yeah, this is actually something that we think a lot about within Realms is how much should we be focused on the core on-chain decentralized like DAO elements of voting, of treasury management, versus how much should we bleed into the actual, like, how do you optimally operate a decentralized organization? How do you work effectively with one another? Because they're similar challenges. Our customer base is the same, but they're two very, very different problems to go and solve. And I think the solution looks quite a bit. I think different pieces of the solution can be embedded, but I think the solution to each looks quite a bit different. And yeah, we've sort of like touched on some of those things, but we've never fully said, hey, we're trying to focus on how to make a DAO operate extremely efficiently outside of the context of voting, treasury management, shared ownership, etc.
Yeah, but we've reached that point of the conversation where now we can talk about how do we solve voter fatigue, and how do we need delegation, and do we need permanent delegation, and do we need these are points where these are not starting points in a DAO conversation. You need to really get your ass kicked. You need to get locked out of your treasury. You need to get to get your DAO going active or something just because you're posting everything on chain. So yeah, it's been a long way, and the future is bright. I remember in last year's Breakpoint, during the last day where there was the Realms presentation, and I thought that was the most exciting talk from all the panels, because it just said what we're going to be building. And now 1 year later, I can see, I can remember so many additions, like what Realms was last year and where Realms is today. And I'm not talking only from a UX UI perspective, which has been improved, and lots of cool things are coming in online, but also I'm talking from extensions to functionalities and interlopability. It's been an awesome journey.
And this is where we're really lucky to have an amazing ecosystem with folks like yourselves in it. We kind of see ourselves as sort of being pulled by the ecosystem in a lot of ways, in terms of what you all want to see, what you all need. And also we're very lucky that so many people in the ecosystem want to contribute back. So it's not just us being these bottlenecks, but it's actually us finding the right ways to empower the ecosystem to contribute to this project and to push things forward. I think, of all the different ecosystems within Solana, the DAO ecosystem is something that's really special, where it's, all of us are kind of have a similar mindset of like, hey, how do we make this as useful as possible? How do we build this in such a way that it solves the needs that we're facing? It's not, there aren't really that many sharp-elbowed folks in the DAO ecosystem, and it's not this 30,000 person ecosystem, right? It's kind of the core builders of Solana who know the chain well, who know the different challenges, and who are able to meaningfully contribute back to it. And so that's something that I very often count our blessings for, that we have this sort of very engaged and active ecosystem.
For 2024, what I really want to see from the Solana governance layer to emerge, I want to see a profitable, revenue positive service DAO, something that will be able to actually make money, have a bank account, and manage to print a receipt. That needs to be the goal, because everything else, accounting wise, we can figure out. We can figure it out even in this gray legal ecosystem. It's fine. We'll navigate. What has stopped us to use so many not even Web2, like IRL services, is printing a receipt. That's what we need to solve. If we manage to solve that in 2024, we won. Trust me on this. We really, really won. It's going to be a crazy year. Do you think we have any chances of solving this?
Well, yeah. What I was going to ask, I love that vision of the future. Let's say someone is sitting out there listening to this podcast today, and they're thinking, "Hey, I want to go start that service DAO. I think I can make that happen." In your opinion, what's kind of standing in their way today of bringing that to life?
I think that being able to print a receipt for a service that they will accept money for, and they need to provide an accounting proof for the Web2 business to submit to their tax authorities. So the transaction loop is complete. That's all. That's all. I mean, it's a very kind of simplistic way of demonstrating the problem. But I think that is an elevator pitch kind of goal for 2024. How can we achieve that? And how can we show other DAOs the path towards it? And I'm pretty sure the path is going to be kind of rugged, but as people walk it, it's going to be smoothened up. That's how all paths start.
Yeah.
So all we need to do is just set a line so people can follow.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the point of dog fooding from earlier, where we should just try and experiment with this, in 2024 of, one of us setting up this DAO and actually seeing what it takes to get to that point of receipt. What are the roadblocks? I also think the other piece that you're hitting on with this point is, for a long time now, I've really felt that in order to see more DAOs in this space, in order to see more activity in this space, you really need more revenue streams, right? You need folks who are able to build sustainable businesses out of a DAO and in a DAO construct. And so the more we're able to make some of these infrastructural components like receipt or accounting easier, that goes a long way. I think the regulatory structures go a long way, but also just finding revenue generating opportunities within the ecosystem, whether it's as a service DAO, whether it's actually putting a product out there for Web2 users in a DAO structure still, whether it's something else. The more channels we're able to find to sustainable revenue and building legitimate businesses or legitimate sustainable DAOs, I think will go a long way.
I totally agree. But I think that the revenue sources are endless. It's how people organize, what structures they will employ, and we need to experiment more, and we need to be able to showcase those experiments. Like, what we need to do is be able to make noise and shout the successes and the failures, so the ecosystem knows what has been tried already. I think this is where we've failed so far. Everybody's trying it in a closed ecosystem, and they're not sharing the stories. And we're also hearing about those very few 3-4 success stories, but we also need to know what has failed.
I think this also has to do with the Solana ecosystem as a whole, and we're being a younger chain and ecosystem than, let's say, EVM, Ethereum. I think what we lack on Solana, even though we have so many awesome tools and the experience is much more friendlier and much more exciting and much more participatory, if there's a word to that, is that we don't have the education, for people that they can come and participate in a DAO. And at our best, I think we were here's that a random NFT DAO minting next week. That's it. So there's so much cool components besides that, but we've stuck there. And I think we need to educate the public, and we need to educate the more retail users, if we are to call them like that, on, DAOs are not daunting. They're not scary. You can come inside, participate, enter a community, and we need to encourage founders to adopt these structures to the way they feel comfortable, of course, because you need to start centralized from somewhere before you go full blown decentralization. But we need to encourage people to experiment under that framework, because we've been so deep that sometimes we forget how the experience looks like for a person that comes onto Solana today and they want to start and they hear this word of a DAO, and where do I start? Where do I learn from that? How do I do it? What are my options there. And it doesn't have to be something that you need to dig very deep to start participating. It needs to be up there, every day. Like we were seeing, the NFT mint, that DAO, Turtle DAO, or Pencil DAO, and stuff like that. We need to be more in the everyday life of our lovely ecosystem, I think.
I totally agree with that. And jumping to solutioning here, one of the things that I think we see in our DeFi space that has worked well is like there's a monthly sort of DeFi roundtable call where all the different DeFi participants are on it. They're sharing best practices. And what has come out of that is, as the DeFi folks have been chatting more, certain like subgroups have spun up within that. One has been, hey, how do we make it easier for new users to onboard into the DeFi ecosystem? Maybe we start doing Twitter Spaces on some regular cadence where we're talking about these matters. And in the Realms ecosystem and the DAO ecosystem, we have like our bi-weekly developer call, but that's pretty like technical, right? And it's pretty focused on, hey, here are the things we added to Realms, and it's not really focused on highlighting the community and the ecosystem. So I agree with you, Taki. I think that's a huge opportunity to sort of spin up, some sort of monthly, here's where we're highlighting what we're seeing, here are the best practices, here are the different DAOs who are spinning up, whether it's a Twitter Spaces, whether it's something else. I think there'd probably be a decent amount of demand for that among the ecosystem. And I think it could go a long way in helping onboard, the next 20 DAOs of tomorrow.
Right on. We definitely need to hit the nail in the head on this one, because I think it's going to be very, very important for more awareness and, burst the closed circle that we have been operating under, and, have people enter and give us their perspectives as newcomers and outsiders, so that we can attract them in.
What is your advice for a DAO that wants to become profitable, that wants to become financially, let's say, sustained, and also be profitable? What would be your advice with the tools that we have today and the ecosystem that we have today?
Yeah, so my advice actually would be to remove the DAO part of that sentence. Meaning, it's like if you're starting an entity, how do you make an entity that's profitable? You find a burning problem that someone has. You find a customer whose needs you understand really well. You find a way to sell into that customer, and then once you have that, right, layering in the DAO structure on top of that is very, very easy, right? It's like if someone's saying to themselves, hey, do I want to build a profitable LLC versus a profitable, C corporation versus something else, like the profitability part of that equation doesn't depend on the underlying structure. The underlying structure can support that and make it easier. And I think our job is sort of the dissemination of why this is such a valuable structure to consider, both from a decentralized on-chain perspective, but also from a community management, trustlessness perspective. But at the end of the day, right, those are all byproducts of your core customer, of your core business, and it's in support of that sort of revenue generation, profitability mechanism that you have discovered.
Do you think there are best practices, and this is related to the previous question, do you think there are best practices in token distribution and in token inflation and all these tokenomics that are involved with governance? Are they completely independent from the profitability of the DAO? Are they an integral part, and founders or core members, core contributors need to really pay attention? Do they go hand in hand? How do you view this equation?
Yeah, this equation is really tough to get right. When we were talking about diminishing some of the barriers for folks spinning up their own DAOs, getting the token structure right, getting the token dissemination is really important. We typically don't touch on the tokenomics piece. That is so sort of individual to the project itself. But even from the perspective of council token, community token, like that's where we spend more of our time. And I think the important piece here is like experimenting quite a bit before you set something into stone. Having the council in place so the council can veto or change things you mess up on, maybe having an initial community token just to see how many people are voting and what the right quorum is before you actually get to the point of saying, okay, hey, here are the right pieces, here's the right quorum, we're disbanding our council. Because you never want to run into the things you were mentioning, like getting locked out of your treasury, for instance. Those are kind of the worst case scenarios. And so I think it really is taking the step-by-step approach, one step at a time, testing what works. It's almost, I mean, it's not dissimilar from your the equity structure of your company, where as you start to give out equity in your company, you want to make sure that you're very thoughtful about who's on your cap table, why they're on your cap table. With the exception being that with the DAO structure, you do have a little bit more flexibility as long as you do have that council in place and you maintain sort of the ability to change the sort of early mistakes you make before you disband that council.
Yeah, but then again, we have the chicken and the egg issue of who watches the councilman, because we've seen that happen, and we've had a very fascinating discussion with Marinade in an earlier episode. So folks who are listening or watching, go watch that. And there was a great idea that popped up that we may be able to add some failsafe in a larger scale, that we include the whole Solana ecosystem and, let's say, Solana holders, and give them the responsibility and the ability to, let's say, veto some kind of situations, like, for example, we witnessed with Parrot. So that would be something truly amazing and truly bring everybody into Solana to give them some piece of the decision making when things go wrong. And it almost feels like kind of self-regulating as an ecosystem, and this has never been done before. And I am personally very excited to if we can pursue more of that idea, because I think it's very exciting to include everybody in the decision making process. When it's kind of a failsafe. When you see that something goes really, really wrong, you can pull that lever. The whole community can say, hey, stop that. That's not happening under our watch. So I think that's something that, it's always worth considering and exploring as a very, very fascinating aspect of banding a community together under extreme threats or something.
I really like that. One of the things I often say is every DAO is on a different point on the path to decentralization. And I don't think it's like there's never going to be a one size fits all. Some DAOs, maybe the project owners, at the onset, one of their things in their charter is, we're going to have a little bit more control, or we're going to retain council privileges. Whereas other DAOs might be, hey, we actually want to get to that fully decentralized point. And maybe the very end state of that decentralized point is, the whole Solana ecosystem involvement and giving some sort of authority in worst case scenarios there. I really like that. I think it feels in the spirit of decentralization. It feels in the spirit of unity of the ecosystem. I think the challenge with all of this stuff is, we used the word voter fatigue earlier. It's like, how do you ensure that the right stakeholders are in the room for the right decisions? I personally, wouldn't want to have a vote on every sort of governmental decision that's being made in the US. I just wouldn't know enough, and I wouldn't do the work to learn enough. And so finding that right balance is important. But I think that the more that the ecosystem could be bought into what's going on, and having some insight into, hey, here are the DAOs that we care about, here are the DAOs that are operating and kind of taking charge of our ecosystem, the more they can feel bought into that process, I think it'll be beneficial for everyone.
Wow, we're closing to the 1 hour mark, and I have so many topics to touch upon. Like, I want us to talk about tokenless governance and its possibilities on realms, and what we could do about that to even make it even simpler. No token, no NFT, nothing. You just need to exist. Just your address existing means one address, one vote. I mean, endless possibilities, and I'm really excited about the future. But in the last 5 minutes, I'd like to talk about IRL events, the Breakpoint. Can we see you there? Are you going to have a panel? Are you going to talk about what's happening to the awesome governance Solana layer?
Yeah, so IRL events wise, we will definitely be at Breakpoint. I'll be at Breakpoint. Sebastian will be at Breakpoint. We should have like a little informal DAO meetup while we're at Breakpoint. I think that would be really nice.
For sure.
Um, yeah, I am speaking about at Breakpoint. I think I'm going to touch on Realms on my talk, but my talk is on some broader Solana Labs initiatives that we'll be unveiling there. So I'm excited to see you guys at that and get your perspective on some of the stuff we're thinking about building. I know we have Athens DAO coming up in December as well, which is
Yes.
extremely exciting. To me, that's still my favorite Solana IRL event that I've attended. It speaks to sort of the power of our small ecosystem, getting into a room together, being able to hash out some of these challenges. I think tokenless governance would be a great topic for for Athens DAO as well. Um, and then beyond that, I've been hearing more and more about kind of these informal conversations popping up in different geographies, different pockets that we just don't even know about. Where more and more of the ecosystem is sort of self-navigating, self-organizing, and having these important governance conversations. And so I love it. I think the sky's the limit. The more we can get in a room and hash this stuff out, it's a really meaty problem, right? These are really hard questions. They're questions that are at the core of our abilities to organize as human beings, right? They go way beyond Web3, blockchain. It's enabled by all of those technologies, but at the end of the day, it goes back to like how should we work together as human beings? How should we operate organizations together as human beings? Like this is the stuff of life. At the end of the day, I think it's both really challenging because of that, but I think it's also very fulfilling because of that at the same time.
No, it's awesome, and we need to tap into the problems of the mature DAOs, because this is an effort that didn't start yesterday. This has been going on and has been building on the successful DAOs and on the active DAOs and on the large treasuries, and all these DAOs have matured, like most of them at least, and they face mature problems that cannot easily be explained into a 15-minute presentation. This or
Or a
a
Twitter
easy
thread.
to understand panel discussion. It's harder, and I agree that having DAO focused events with DAO focused audience and speakers will go a long way.
Another thought there as well that you made me think about is you look at something like Y Combinator, and a lot of the benefit of Y Combinator is you have the Rolodex there where you can if you're a Series B company, you can call up the Series C company that went through Y Combinator and ask for their help and support with what you're navigating, and that same Series C company can call the company that IPO'd and help ask for help navigating through some of those elements. I think maybe some of that is missing in our ecosystem where as we've talked about here, starting a DAO, navigating a DAO is really tricky. And if there's a way to sort of connect folks with the successful DAO builders, get perspective on what they've been through, and sort of have the whole ecosystem helping each other. I think it happens a little bit on an informal basis, but we can probably all be doing a better job of sort of spearheading those connections and interactions.
No, it does. It does happen on the back channels of Telegram and Discord and in DMs. And I've seen the evolution of countries of incorporation, of preferred lawyers, of preferred accountants, and it's evolving together with the DAO. So having these resources, these journeys, these experiences, kind of more available to the general Solana startup entrepreneur kind of crowd, I think it's going to go a long way. Like having 6, 7, 10 popular protocols that have gone through hurdles like hacks or social hacks or whatever. I'm not going to mention names. We all know it, and they survived their experience, even if it's kind of not the total of the story, not the totality of the story, even if it's a little bit blurred in some points. I think it's important to talk about these things. So yeah, I look forward to what's going to come, and I look forward on having another episode maybe in the future to talk about more like advanced ideas.
Let's record one in Athens. Let's do the next one in Athens. We sit in a room together and we record an episode. I have thoughts on that, but later on.
I
Before
think
we
that's
close in,
we'll have all of the big brains in Athens as well, so we can go really deep technically on that.
Before we close in, I want to ask a question. We know, me and Wells know the answers, I think, from our experience. But can you tell the people in the audience why Solana is the future of DAOs in terms of the experience and the whole package that comes with the realms and everything?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different layers of it. One, the first and foremost, I think you don't really understand the importance of until you get to the other ones. But one is everything is on chain, right? So Solana is so cheap that when people talk about having a true decentralized organization, everything happens on chain. There's not sort of this proxy vote where someone then manually goes and executes a proposal. It's complete trustlessness where if you're voting on something, if the vote goes through, that thing is going to happen. Even the comments are on chain. They don't necessarily need to be on chain, but even the comments are on chain. So I think that's a big piece. Obviously, the speed of knowing that as soon as that transaction happens, it's going to be executed on chain. The cost is another big piece where a vote isn't going to cost you $10 to go and vote on a proposal. So if you're truly looking to have on-chain governance, that's one big component. I think the second is the ecosystem, and the ecosystem from a number of perspectives. One is from the perspective of having a DAO ecosystem that's there to kind of handhold you, that's kind of consolidated around similar tooling and best practices. It's not this super bifurcated free for all where you kind of have to figure out what you have to go and build. You do have sort of these figureheads and these best practices to help you along your journey. And just as a builder, having the ecosystem there, I think regardless of a DAO, the Solana ecosystem is extremely friendly to builders. There's so many footholds that you can use to get up to speed. And then the final one is I think for the technology that Solana enables, right? So for the same benefits I listed for DAOs, whether it's speed, whether it's the cost, whether it's how many transactions that we can handle, like all of those are extremely important pieces as you choose the chain that you want to build your product on. And like I said earlier, right, the first step is figuring out your business, your customer, your problem. The next step is layering on the DAO. And so from the standpoint of having the core technology there that will allow you to best execute on that target customer, on solving their needs, I think Solana has far and away shown itself as the most performant blockchain from that standpoint. And then once you're ready for a DAO, we thankfully have this amazing DAO tooling infrastructure built in that we can get you up to speed with.
Yeah, and the events. Lots of
And
food.
the events, exactly.
Lots of food. Endless food. All my videos are from food.
And the best vibes, and the best vibes.
Yeah, like if I had to pitch the Solana event scene to someone from the Ethereum world or the Bitcoin world, I would characterize it as tribalism without toxicity. I think it's
I
exactly
like that.
exactly
Throw
that.
that on a t-shirt somewhere, pass it out at one of our events.
Awesome stuff, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We will vibe together at Breakpoint, and for sure we'll have another talk sooner or later.
Amazing. This was amazing. Really appreciate it. Take care, guys.